giờ cũng còn xung lên xả tay nữa đó. Như sao? Linh ơi. Con trai. Con trai. Lên chưa con trai làm con ơi. Đây, con trai thủ con à. Con trai. Hello. Hello con nhà. Chú chuột tung, con chuột tung mà. Chú phải tung một cái chuột một món nào sao nè. Con chuột. Sao luôn đó. Tung món nào nè. Bây giờ chết.
So how many people recognize the scene? That's a fair amount. All right. So I apologize for starting the day on such a sad note, but I want everybody to feel the gravity of the situation because what we're going to talk about demands it. My topic today is about games to help deal with PTSD. I'll give you a second to write down my name. All right. What is PTSD? Oh. Are we good? All right. So what is PTSD? Well, PTSD is an abbreviation for post-traumatic stress disorder. In short, it means it's a mental disorder that's caused when someone goes through a traumatic event, a life-changing event, something that has affected them deeply. Now, it could be caused by experiencing things such as child abuse, war, or rape, like we saw in the clip earlier. Or it can be caused by witnessing certain events like maybe a car accident, combat, or even a natural disaster. What happens when you have PTSD? Your anxiety and stress levels go into overdrive, you break into nervous sweats, and you have flashbacks and memories. Maybe you're a war veteran, and then you wake up in the middle of the night, and then you see dismembered body parts all over the floor. You see killing innocent children and wives and men, and it's not something you wanted to do, but something you were forced to do. You relive those memories over and over again, and it's horrifying. You try to avoid situations, maybe if you're a victim of rape, you try to avoid parking lots, you try to avoid people. If you've been abused as a child, maybe you don't want to get in touch with older people at all, you just don't want to be around them. They shape your life. They change the way you perceive the world. And last night you had hands, but today, hands and feet, but then you stepped on a landmine, and today you don't have body parts anymore. How do you cope with that? How do you deal with that? So these are not just psychological. I should probably say they're not just psychological. They cause physical changes too. They change the size of your hippocampus and prefrontal cortex and your amygdala. They are responsible for your emotions and your hormones. So whatever you consider to be normal reactions to different events, that doesn't happen with them anymore. Things that might affect you will not affect them. But minute things that will not affect you, like maybe a creaking door opening, might trigger some memories in them that might cause them to panic. It is incredibly taxing. It is not easy to live life like this. You're stuck in an endless loop. You keep going over the possibilities and the situations. You replay them over and over again in your brain until they're etched into the wiring of your brain. And that's extremely dangerous. So the first step you need to do is sort of like break away from that, distract your brain, think away from all the things that you've been thinking of. So let's talk a little bit about the traditional forms of treating PTSD. And the first one I'm going to talk about is something called CBT, and that is cognitive behavior therapy. This is much like traditional, you walk into a clinic, and then the therapist talks you through your experiences and the stuff that you've faced, and whatever feelings or emotions. You have a lot of bitterness, anger, regret, guilt. You have a lot of different emotions, and the therapist will try to make you change your perspective on them. They'll try to change your worldview, your thoughts, and try to reconcile your feelings and emotions with yourself. The next one is EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So there was a therapist in the early 1900s called Francine Shapiro, and she figured out that when she was thinking about disturbing thoughts, if she moved her eyes, those thoughts were less painful. So what therapists do is that when you're thinking or talking about your memories, they do certain motions, and then you're supposed to follow those motions. And when you do that, those memories and thoughts are less, traumatic to you. But it's been debated whether this is actually, whether it works or not, but nobody's proven or disproven any of them. Of course, you have pills, but then the problem with that is that everybody's body is different. Everyone reacts differently. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution. They have side effects, and they might be hard to procure. Different states have different laws. Yeah. And of course, group therapy. In group therapy, you feel that you're part of a family because everyone else has also faced the same things that you have. It's easier to understand, and you feel like you're in a safe space to discuss your thoughts and your feelings and emotions. It helps build relationships, and you can open up about your story. But in my opinion, all of these methods have one fundamental flaw, in that you're still living those experiences. You're still in that moment. You're still recollecting all of that. And you're in the place that you don't want to be. And I think this goes against, the idea that you should be thinking about something else. Your mind should be distracted. You're acutely aware of the situation you're in and what you're doing, and you're self-conscious. So what do? So the important point is PTSD treatment, traditional treatment works, but it's grueling. It's really hard. It's like chemotherapy. It works, but it's extremely hard. So what do we do next? So let's talk about the history of treating PTSD with games. The first experiment was done back in 2004 when American military researchers as well as doctors converted an Xbox game into a virtual reality combat simulator. Yes, there was VR back in 2004, and the government has been working on it for a while. So it was called Virtual Iraq, and they made Marines get into the headset, and they introduced sights and sounds and smells to them, and then they made them recount their experiences in detail while questioning them. I'm going to show you a sample video.
All of the bells and whistles that come with virtual reality are simply designed to help the combat veteran revisit the traumatic experience as best as possible. Let's get the weapon outside. So
it feels pretty much like a real weapon. It's got almost the same weight to it.
The equipment in and of itself really resonates with some of the younger veterans, and I think it allows us to get more people in that might engage in the treatment.
So, where do you think placing you in the Humvee would be most effective? Not in the driver's seat. Okay, so now that's the front passenger seat.
I want to know what the time of day was, who they were with, what environment they were in. So I can accordingly set up the variables.
On a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being the highest level of anxiety or distress, tell me how that distress level is right now.
I'd say 1 or 2.
1 or 2.
My goal is to keep them at a consistent level of anxiety and distress so that they can then adapt to it.
Now, I know what you're thinking. They've already been through so much trouble. They've already been through these traumatic experiences. Why the hell are you making them go through it again? Isn't it cruel and inhuman? Let's talk about something called exposure therapy. I know that Francisco is going to talk more about this, but I'm going to explain what exactly it is. So it's a type of therapy where the subject is introduced to threats in small doses. It's a perceived threat. It's not a real threat. So as he gets accustomed to each level of threat, it's increased slightly so that he gets conditioned against it. So this is done repeatedly until the person does not perceive it as a threat at all. So let's say he's afraid of rattling noises. So they're going to increase it in smaller and smaller doses until he finds that that's not a threat at all. This has proven to be extremely effective even outside the context of games. And it's been really effective in treating not just PTSD, but other things like OCD and some anxiety disorders. Now, veterans have the government backing them, but not everybody has the money or the facilities or the kind of support personnel that they have. What about the rest of us? What can other people do? Now, the thing to note is that no one has actually developed a game that targets this psychographic specifically. No one makes games just for PTSD patients. So we need to find out what games in general can do to help PTSD patients, and let's look at some of those. The first point is it diverts your mind, and this is the most important thing that I said. So to break those pathways and those dangerous, loops that form inside your brain, games are excellent at engaging you. They help focus that negative energy into something more useful because games have a reward system, right? It releases dopamine in your brain. It makes you feel better. So it's better to divert that energy. You don't have to be you. So as he says, I'm not Rob with PTSD for those 90 minutes. I'm that person in the game. I'm not a veteran who doesn't have feet. I'm not a guy who can't walk anymore. No, I'm that guy who can walk and jump and do whatever the hell he wants in that game. You can be that other person. It's extremely liberating, and it makes you feel really good about yourself, especially because you've seen yourself as the guy who's been bound to a wheelchair for the past 5 years. It gives you a sense of purpose, as he says. He couldn't even move his hands initially because, he'd fractured his spine. But because he had a goal, he had something to look forward to, he pushed himself, and that helped with the recovery process. It makes mundane tasks fun. When an amputee is learning how to stand, how to balance himself, he's not thinking about that if he's playing Wii Fit. He's thinking about the game. So that this also adds to what we talked about, the diversion of mind. He doesn't feel he's doing a task. He doesn't feel he's actually doing some boring recovery exercise. He's involved in the game. It helps bond with other people. So there were two victims of PTSD. They were both victims of two completely different events, but they bonded together in the same room because they were playing games, and they were able to go through the emotional, mental, as well as physical trauma because of the bond that this game helped create. So, like I said, there isn't a game that's specifically designed to target PTSD patients. It's more about games in general that really help PTSD patients. For example, there was a study done in the UK where if you played Tetris within 6 hours of a traumatic incident like a car accident, there was a 62% less chance of you developing PTSD. And they also said that 2 days later, they had 0 flashbacks. So in summary, so I want to say that I focus a little bit on the war veterans, but that's just because those are the easiest resources to find. It's hard to go through these experiences. It's hard to admit that it has had an impact on your life. And the hardest of all is to speak about them. So for someone who's been in the Army, it's easier for them to talk about it because they've been trained. But people who've been through rape or maybe child abuse, it's really hard to speak about it, so you tend to not find that many references online. But the methods I've just described are useful for all types of PTSD. So because of the intrinsic nature of games, they are great tools to help with PTSD patients. And I should have, references. And Thank you. All right, thank you.